This is Conversations with Women in Sales, an award-winning podcast created by Barbara Giamanco, who hosted the first 67 episodes. Listen to interviews with amazing women about their journeys in their sales careers, often discussing sales leadership tips, ideas, and strategies. We aim to inspire women to consider a sales career and for some women to grow into sales leadership. Men, we appreciate your allyship. And now, your host, Lori Richardson.
Big shout out to our official sponsor, Reprise, the leading full funnel, product-led growth platform. With Reprise, your sales team creates, presents, and shares product demos, perfectly customized for each step of your sales motion. Go to getreprise.com/womenInSales to try for free today. I'm here today with Katie Walsh. Katie is a director of sales at HubSpot. Katie, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Lori. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, what I noticed about you was that you have been at HubSpot for more than 9 years. And that is pretty unusual these days, especially right now and lately. And I want to be sure that we talk about that. But the first thing I want to do is kind of go back to when you were in college. I saw that you went to UMass Amherst and you got your bachelor's degree in communication. Plus, you were an athlete. You were a Division I field hockey athlete, and my son was a Division I hockey player at Northeastern. So back in the day, it's been a while, but I know what a rigorous program the D1 sports are, and I bet that helped shape you into who you are today. Would you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think some people think sports is an overused analogy with sales, but it does translate so nicely. And for me, I think that playing D1 field hockey is kind of the foundation for everything I've done. It taught me how to be really goal oriented, how to work as a team, how to have really strong work ethic and grit. And I also had an amazing coach that shaped, I think, who I was both on and off the field. So I'm still grateful for my time at UMass Amherst and playing field hockey there.
Yeah, that's great. I just watched this series about Title IX on ESPN. It's a really great series for anybody listening. It's not just about sports, because Title IX wasn't only about sports. It was about equality in federally funded programs, but which primarily sports in college, but it dealt with other things. And it was a really good series. And it was interesting how furious men were when Title IX came about. And I would encourage people to look at it, because one of the key takeaways I got was that when the women worked together back then, yeah, I think that was in the 70s, then things happened. And when everybody's doing something individually, it didn't. So it's really, really interesting. Good stuff. I saw it on Hulu, and anyway, just throwing that out there. Kind of down the entire, yeah, really good. Yeah, a little detour, but yeah. So what I wanted to say about sports too is that field hockey is very much a team sport, and just because someone is an athlete didn't make them a good salesperson necessarily, but the ones who came from a real team environment and who could be coached well, because we know those players who are not very coachable, and a lot of them were not very coachable salespeople either. So I think there was like a blanket that everybody thought, oh, we got to hire athletes and that will solve all our problems. But good athletes, can make for amazing salespeople. So what did you think when you left college? What were you planning to do?
Yeah, so I would say my senior year was stressful because I had sort of had a plan for the majority of my life. I knew I wanted to play a sport in college. Didn't necessarily know that I was going to end up at UMass Amherst, but I knew I knew I was going to college, and I knew wanted to play a sport there. And then after that, I was like, what am I going to do for a job? Communications, great degree for anyone that's a communications major out there, but you probably know it's not super specialized. So sort of leaves you a lot of options, which can sort of be a bit paralyzing for you by having so many different ways to take it. So I was, and all of I'm the youngest of five. So
I am too.
all of my siblings, oh, really? All of my other siblings had sort of known what they wanted to do for a long time between teachers, things in criminal justice, the medical field. And I just didn't. And I knew I had sort of a thirst to travel a little bit. So I thought of doing a job that would include some corporate travel, and ended up discovering Meditech when I was still in college. And I was really committed. And I think my mom put a lot of pressure on me as well to have a job for when I graduated. And so I ended up going through the interview process with Meditech. There was a lot of corporate travel involved. It wasn't a sales role. It was actually post-sales as an implementation specialist, training people how to use the software. And once I got the job, and I hadn't graduated yet, I was really excited that I finally had a plan going out of college. Now, that's to say for anybody out there that does not have a plan, it is more than okay, because as you've followed my career a little bit, I did jump around a little bit before finding HubSpot, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I didn't explore. I didn't do as many internships because I was playing field hockey, and I didn't explore sort of where I get the most energy, what type of work did I really enjoy. And so I had been at Meditech for, I think it was only about 9 months. And then one of my cousins was actually in sales, and he seems like he lived a really awesome lifestyle. And he was like, you'd be really good at sales. And people had sort of told me that all my life, but I had such a narrow-minded view of sales that it was that you were just trying to take people's money. And I was like, I'm not going to feel good about that and be able to go to sleep at night. So,
You didn't have a relative that was your cousin was in sales, right? But your parents weren't, no real estate, realtors, or
nobody in my immediate family has done anything in the corporate world. And I think my cousin is probably actually one of the first ones that did. And he was about 4 years older than me. So he had sold me on to try it out and go to EMC. So I had interviewed at EMC and as a BDR, business development rep, so booking meetings for sales reps. And that was a very, very different culture than HubSpot.
a big machine, right?
Yeah. Massive company, sort of that old school sales mentality. All that to say, although the culture wasn't at the time the right fit for me, it was one of the best sales training programs that I went through. And I attribute my time, which was a little over a year, I believe, at EMC, to my success at HubSpot, because it really taught me. I mean, it was a very rigorous sales program, and learning all of that, those important skills pretty early on, I think is what carried me still today at HubSpot. So I'm grateful for my time at EMC because of that, but made the decision to switch over to HubSpot was by far the best decision I've ever made. And I actually got a lot of pushback. You mentioned jumping around from roles. Staying at a company for 9 years isn't that common anymore. I come from, a family in the world back then where you actually did stay at a company for a very, very long time. So
yeah, me too.
Exactly. So here I am, the youngest of five, as this, only one in the corporate world. And I keep bouncing around jobs. And my parents are like, what are you doing? You need to figure it out. I got a lot of pushback on that. And, but I think my advice to other people is, you know yourself better than anyone. You're going to get a lot of feedback and from everyone around you, mostly because they care about you. They just want to make sure that, my parents, was coming from a good spot. They wanted to make sure I was setting myself up for success. But you know yourself, and if a company doesn't feel right or a role doesn't feel right, then In today's world, you really don't have to stay there and stick it out. Go with what you know and
Yeah.
go with what gives you the most energy.
Well, and I can imagine going from an EMC background to HubSpot is very different. And, HubSpot has really grown and changed over time. And so back when you started, it was newer. I mean, it wasn't a startup, but it was young. And, but you went into an enterprise BDR role. Was HubSpot just launching the enterprise?
So they had tried it. I believe, I think this was their second attempt at sort of exploring the enterprise opportunity at HubSpot when I joined. So the team was very small. I was the second BDR, and there was maybe 4 or 5 sales reps when I had started on the enterprise team. So it was a very, very small team. And to your point, HubSpot when I joined was probably around 500 employees, but still felt very, I mean, especially compared to today, like it felt very, very small. I felt like I knew pretty much all 500 employees at that time.
Yeah.
And so the enterprise when I joined was something that they were still sort of feeling out and exploring to see if it was going to be successful. But
Yeah.
they were choosing to invest in it and try and grow the team.
Yeah. That's great. And so how did you rise through the ranks? I mean, was it your goal to get into leadership, or at what point did you realize it? Because I know, I was an individual contributor for a long time in sales, and that worked out fine for me because I was a single parent and I just wanted to take care of myself. I didn't want to deal with all the other people that would be under me if I was a manager. So it's not that everyone should go into leadership. It's just that there's so few women higher in the ranks in sales, sales executives. And, if you could help us with any secrets or, any suggestions, I think that would be really good.
Yeah, I think so. When I had, when I went from EMC to HubSpot, it was essentially the same role. It was a BDR role that I was taking on. And even before going to HubSpot, when I knew I wanted to leave EMC, I was like, all right, I need to figure it out. Like, what do I want to do? And I was exploring to teach for America and maybe be a teacher. And I think sales, again, from what I was so familiar with in my life and my family and growing up, it was not like I didn't know people that did it. So I only started meeting the people that I worked with at EMC, and I had some mentors there, and I think mentors are huge. And it was Corey. He had told me, like, Katie, if you don't like sales here, that's okay, but like, you're good at what you do. Don't give up on sales. So, and I found HubSpot. It seemed like when I was doing sort of my pro con list on like, what I like about sales, what I don't like about sales, what I like about EMC, what I don't like about EMC, it was checking the boxes for like, all right, let me give this another shot. And so I've, entered at the BDR role. And it's funny because now I feel like people are not in the BDR role as long as I was. I had a year at EMC and then about 18 months at HubSpot. So about 2.5 years in an entry-level sales role. That's a long time to be booking meetings for other people.
Now it's like 6 months. It's like, I hit all my numbers. When do I get promoted, Katie?
Right? Exactly. And I also still was doubting myself, even though I was one of the best BDRs at the time at HubSpot. I was like, but I don't think I should be a sales rep. And I thought I should go into like account management or customer support. And the reason for it, when it came down to like me really understanding, is I was afraid to fail. Having the quota over my head, I was like, although I like this, it feels like, what if I can't do it and I don't hit my quota? And like, so it was all the what ifs and like, what if I fail? And again, I had a mentor at the time at HubSpot, and she had said, she had really encouraged me to like, she was like, you're going to be great at this role, and ultimately believed in me. And I think that's sort of the moral of the story for my entire growth trajectory at HubSpot is having someone that believes in you, whether that's your direct manager, whether it's another mentor that you seek out, I think when there's somebody else that believes that you can do something that you can't because you haven't yet tried,
Yeah.
it really empowers you to just go for it and almost like want to prove that person right for being so kind to believe in you in a way. And
We get a lot of men that listen to this podcast, and that's something for the male leaders. And we appreciate your allyship. You know, believing it, letting someone know, I know you can do this, and just try it again, or try it a different way, or I'll support you. That makes all the difference. You're right. It's happened for a lot of other women that way.
yeah, and I think that's an important thing to call out. Like as women, sometimes we do struggle with that confidence. Like there's so much data out there that, men can check one box on the job description and they'll apply and think they're the best fit.
100%.
We'll check all boxes but one and be like, oh no, I can't, I'm not qualified.
Yeah.
And I think that is really real. And just because somebody's struggling on the confidence thing doesn't mean they can't do it. So ultimately, after all of that, I decided that I wanted to go for it. And once I set my mind to doing something, it's like, then I really, really want it. And then anybody that doubted, I guess,
Watch out.
yeah, I don't know if it's from being the youngest mentality, but it's like anybody that says I can't do it as good as you, like I'm coming for you and I want to I have this chip on my shoulder. And
Yes.
so I got promoted as an enterprise sales rep. And that was also really unique because HubSpot stopped doing that you couldn't go from a BDR to an enterprise sales rep. You had to start in small business and work your way up. Makes a lot of sense. At the time, HubSpot wasn't big enough to have defined rules. And I had, really wanted it and proved give me a shot. And then in my first full year as a sales rep, I finished as the number one sales rep in all of North America direct,
Wow.
and across all segments. And it's funny when you think about that and say that, and I still struggle with confidence. And then I look back on things and it's like, I almost wasn't even going to do this career. And then in my first year, I was number one. So my message is don't be afraid or you can be afraid. It's okay to be afraid, but don't let fear hold you back, or the what ifs and all the what if possibilities hold you back from trying something. Because what if you do succeed? What if you are the number one rep? Flip your mentality and think about it that way. So you don't miss out on an opportunity to really show off how great you are.
Yeah. And what's the downside of being in sales for a couple of years, right? If you go on to be an entrepreneur someday, you'll know how to sell, which most entrepreneurs don't. And if you go to a company or stay with a company and you want to rise up the career ladder, you sell your ideas every day, right?
That's the thing. If you even have a little bit of interest in sales, try it. And because no matter what you do after, either it proves that it's the right spot for you, or maybe you find out that it's not the right spot. It's not what you enjoy. The skill set that you learn, I think, as a salesperson carries over into so many different roles. I mean, you're dealing with people every day. You're dealing with people that you just met. How do you have these conversations? And that's going to translate into pretty much anything that you're going to do moving forward.
Yeah. Life skills too. I mean,
Exactly.
family and friends. Yeah. And now HubSpot has a female CEO, Yamini Rangan. And she came up through some sales, right? I mean, I think she had some sales in her background. How's that changed the atmosphere at HubSpot?
So Yamini, when she came in, even as chief customer officer, was pretty involved. So I felt like from a day-to-day perspective, it was a very natural shift. She was already had her hands in a lot of things. And, but it was just so inspiring. I mean, to be at a company and in an industry, like sales industry that's so male dominated, and have a female CEO, take over, it was just really inspiring. Like, wow, this company really is such a great place to work, and like we you now can see yourself in it, like you can be CEO, if you're a woman, and there's so few of them, and she's just done such an amazing job from running the company operationally to really leaning into our culture and our D&I and B initiatives. So it's been really awesome, and I think every both male and female, everyone has felt really inspired to have her kind of leading the charge now.
Yeah, that's so cool. And HubSpot's been transparent for a number of years about diversity and equity and inclusion and sharing numbers every year and also saying, listen, we didn't start soon enough. We're not perfect. We didn't start, we wish we started sooner. I think that that's really great too. And for people that, women, when they look for a new role, they go to the company website and they go to, the glass doors and the rep sites, rep view and some of the other sites and look to see how people are treated. And if there are issues around diversity and inclusion, a lot of women will not pursue that company. And it's really important for companies that are looking to get more diversity and inclusion on their sales teams that they need to be very conscious of that. And if you just have like 4 bro co-founders, on your website, maybe you take their pictures off. I don't know. But, you need to be thinking about those kinds of things if you're working to expand and be more representative of who your buyers are, right?
Yeah,
HubSpot's done a good job in that way, I think.
we absolutely have. And we definitely have a lot more work to do. And we know that, and we're committed to it. And I think that's the first step, is recognizing the importance of it and being committed to it. And what you said about companies is so true. That's probably like in all the interviews that I've had, that's one of the number one questions I get asked, is, what does your company do for DI and B, or like, what can I expect? And um, I, fortunately I work at HubSpot, and there's a lot I can say as an answer to that question and be very genuine and authentic. And there's a lot of companies out there that I'd love to love they're answering that question.
Yeah, women care a lot about that. They also care a lot about ethics in a company and their professional development. I mean, we tend to plan, like you were saying, you want to plan from college, where you would go and have this all figured out. And, I think it's just our nature in how we were raised and probably some of our genes. But we were planners. And so if I go to HubSpot, what kind of professional development will I get? And where could I be in, 2 or 3 or 9 years, right? And those are such hard things to answer, but when people can have that conversation, I think that's helpful for them to get more women on their teams as well. So what have you learned about yourself over the years, getting into leadership and helping, shape the careers of other people now?
Um, to pinpoint it, I mean, there's so much I've learned. I've grown. I don't even know that I'm the same person, but when I first started HubSpot 9 years ago, um, I think that the biggest thing that I've learned, especially with sales, because at times whether if you're an individual contributor, even if you're part of a bigger team, you can be very individualized focused. You're also, it's sales. So there is always a constant focus on the number. But as y- as I've grown and as I've moved up in leadership, it's like, it all comes down to starting with the people and leading leading as a human being, dealing with other human beings in the most simple way to put it, because there's so many situations that come up, and again, you're dealing with people, human emotions that you may have had a similar type situation or never encountered it before. And there's no real exact black and white rule book to follow on how you should handle it. And my guiding North Star is to always, you know, lead with empathy and lead with, putting the human first. Like in general, like our philosophy at HubSpot on a bigger level is, customer, company, segment, team, individual, right? Like that's the progression of how we think about solving problems. But on an individual level, as individual, like personal situations come up, it's like you really have to lead with empathy, especially, with what we all have gone through the past couple of years with COVID. Everybody just has so much going on outside of what we're doing here at HubSpot or in our day to days. And it's important to remember that, at HubSpot has been such a great company that you've been like all in that sometimes you're like, this is our everything. This is all people are focused on is what's going on at HubSpot. But the reality is that's not the case. People have lives right outside of HubSpot. They have, you know, just a lot going on. So I think really being a good people leader is like first and foremost something that is most important to me.
Yeah, that's great. So I wonder, is there any book or podcast or anything that you recommend that you've liked that might be written by a woman or a podcast that's hosted other than this one?
But I said more of a first one. The one of the podcasts that I really love is We Can Do Hard Things by Glennon Doyle.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Have you listened to that?
Yeah.
I find it to be light at times and funny, but it's also really inspiring. And she sort of talks, different podcast. There's a wide range of topics, both on like the personally and professional side that can be relevant.
Yeah.
And I just think I just think it's really, her podcast is very inspiring in that, exactly what the title is. We can do hard things. And she walks through examples and you almost find comfort in some of her examples of like kind of crappy situations that have happened to, women, especially. And you're like, oh, I'm not alone. And that is interesting. And she gives you sort of this new perspective on how to look, how to evaluate it and then sort of move on from whatever that situation was. So I really, really love that one.
Oh, that's great. Well, I really appreciate hearing about your story, Katie. And I encourage people to, look into the fact that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And sometimes, a lot of times it's people have issues with their immediate supervisor, their manager. And a lot of times, I don't know, in my career, I outlasted the manager, the bad manager, because they usually get found out, not always, but sometimes they get promoted. But, it's really good to not just think you have to go necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell people that a lot, that you should go where you're celebrated and not tolerated. And I think sometimes people think that. I just think people should keep moving to new jobs. But I think it says a lot to stick with a program. And if you believe in the philosophy of the company and the foundational principles, and, there's always going to be issues in every company. And if they get worked out, there's no reason to go somewhere else. And I bet your parents are happy that you went to HubSpot.
Yes, I think so. And the grass isn't always greener is so true. I mean, in being here 9.5 years, I've had a lot of colleagues and close colleagues that have, come and moved on. And we've actually had, especially more recently, a lot of people kind of boomerang back to HubSpot, which has been pretty cool. And they do tell us that like the grass is not greener. And it depends on, what you're looking for in your career. Sometimes like it does make sense to move on, but I do think HubSpot is a really, really special place, and maybe even a bit of a unicorn out there. So I'm very grateful for it. And I think, the biggest thing that you want a company that you can grow with. And also know that growing, I think, doesn't always necessarily mean a title change either, right? You want to make sure that you're learning, growing, and developing in, fully encompassing of what that means. It doesn't always just mean that I'm getting a new title. And I think having that mentality was really helpful for me at HubSpot, because there were times where I was in a role maybe a little bit longer than I wanted to. Um, but when you're there and you're sort of in a role where you're like, all right, I have this down, I'm ready for the next thing. You also can start to leverage that extra time that you have by getting into that sort of mastery stage, by exploring, what should be next and how can I fine tune my skills that will really prepare me for what I'm going to do after this.
Yeah, it's like being the CEO of your own thing. It's something you can develop. You don't have to wait for somebody to, and don't wait for somebody to tap you on the shoulder, right? You have to speak up, and you have to work on those skills that will be needed at the next level. I think that's really great advice. And requiring
that be the CEO of your own career, because nobody else is going to be. And the manager thing is true. Like, I do believe that people tend to leave managers, not companies. And if you do find I think what you said, if you find yourself at a good company and the manager isn't great, you definitely can outlast them. And I'd really encourage everyone to lean into mentorship. If you're not getting what you need from your manager, you're probably not going to be able to change them. So lean into finding mentors that do build you up and help you, work towards whatever it is that you're striving for.
Right. That's great. And are you hiring?
We absolutely are hiring. Feel free to ping me on LinkedIn if anyone's interested.
There you go. It's Katie Walsh, Director of Sales, HubSpot. Thank you so much for being here, and continued success.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conversations with Women in Sales. You can find all of our episodes at womensalespros.com/podcast. Help us spread the word, and let's change the face of B2B sales.